Every little thing you think that you need. Every little thing you think that you need. Every little thing that's just feeding your greed. Oh, I bet that you'd be fine without it.
You're listening to the Minimalist Podcast with Joshua Fields Milburn and TK Coleman.
Thank you, Malabama. Hello, everybody. Coming up on this free public minimal episode, a caller has a question about wanting to spend her money on two different things, but she's having trouble making the right decision. And then we've got a lightning round question about our favorite pleasures that money can't buy. That's followed by our Right Here, Right Now segment and a listener tip for you. You can check out the full Maximal edition of episode 447. That's the full episode where we answer 5 times the questions and we dive deep into several simple living segments. That private podcast episode is out right now at patreon.com/theminimalists. Your support keeps our podcast 100% advertisement free because sing along at home, y'all. Advertisements suck. Let's start with our callers. If you have a question or a comment for our show, we would love to hear from you. Give us a call. Our phone number is 406-219-7839, or simply email a voice recording right from your phone to podcast@theminimalists.com. Our first question today is from Monica.
Hi guys, my name is Monica. I'm a 25-year-old from Munich, Germany. I have a question about money and minimalism, or maybe about non-objects and minimalism. Right now, there are 2 things I could do that would maybe enhance the quality of my life, but they are both really expensive. I'll give you the examples. I could get my eyes lasered, which would be 4,800 euros, and I could get a tattoo. The artist I chose wants 1,700 euros. The thing is, I'm not blind without getting my eyes lasered because, of course, I have glasses. And having a beautiful tattoo of mountains on my forearm would be nice, especially when I can't make the time to go to the mountains in my day-to-day life. But is it worth it? Am I too attached to my money? I have to add, I'm still a student and will be for 2.5 more years. But I have saved up a bunch of money over the past years because that's important to me. But what do I do with that money if I can't seem to spend it? Am I clinging to it? Or am I intentional about spending it? I have to admit that over the past year, I've spent way too much money on small, nice-to-have things and lost the minimalist mindset because I went through a hard time emotionally. So maybe I'm now a little too hard on myself? Your thoughts would be appreciated. Bye.
TK, I love this phrase, non-objects, or we might call them non-things. But there's obviously some decision clutter here. One of my favorite maxims of all time that I got from you is that dreams don't come true, decisions do.
Right.
And now Monica's obviously struggling to decide between 2 different things, although I would argue it's more than 2 things. But let's start with a simple question. If we were to distill her question down into a bite-sized chunk, it would be, how do you decide between 2 things when you have the money for only one?
You first begin by recognizing that the problem isn't that you have 2 options and you can only afford one. Because if you had 10 options, you'd have a difficulty with an 11th one that you couldn't afford, right? So if I says, here's the money for the second option, now you can have them both. Well, where did the 2 options that are on the table come from? They came from your imagination. They came from your observation of circumstances. They came from different ideas you were able to form of things that could enhance your life. And the same creative space, the same area of life that gave you the idea for the tattoo or for the getting the eye surgery, that can give you a 3rd or a 4th idea. So there will always be trade-offs in life. There will always be things that you will have to forego in order to make something that you want happen. And you want to start by recognizing that there is no alternative space you can occupy that's going to free you from that. If it wasn't this, it would be something else. Now, that doesn't answer your question. That doesn't solve your problem. And that's okay. We can give more than that. But when you accept that, it gives you this sense of being free from looking at your situation with a kind of resentment towards your circumstances. And when you're free from that, you can just have fun thinking critically and creatively about what you need. That's the first step.
This is an interesting decision that's being made here because it's not for a physical thing. It's not like, should I buy this car or put a down payment on a house? Should I buy this dress or this pair of jeans? And it's also not an experience. I mean, it sort of is, right? But there's an outcome that we want here. When you have an experience, you're not going there for the outcome. You're not going to the movies and buying your ticket and waiting in line so that you can get to the end of the movie. But when you are buying eye surgery, laser surgery for your eyes, or you're buying a tattoo. My wife she has tattoos all over. She just got a new tattoo this past week. And the experience itself, she's sitting in a chair for 8 hours while someone is poking needles into her arm.
Yeah.
It's the end justifies the means. She's not going there for the means, so it's not really about the experience, although that is a part of it. There is an outcome, but it's not the physical outcome where, like, I'm buying a pair of jeans or I'm buying a new shirt and I'm trying to decide between this shirt or this shirt. And so where Monica is right now, she's asking some questions about the trade-offs. The Thomas Sowell quote obviously comes to mind here. Yeah. There are no solutions. There are only trade-offs. And I wish I had a really easy answer for Monica. It's like, you know what? Obviously, the tattoo makes much more sense for you, right? It's the better choice. And here are the 17 reasons why that tattoo is a better choice for you. She asked a question, though. She said, is it worth it? And I think that question uncovers this other possibility. What can I do with this money? Obviously, I can get the eye lasering. I can get the tattoo. Or I can get something else. Is this the best use of this money? So there might be a third option. No, I'd rather put that money toward X, Y, or Z. Or maybe I'd just like to save it. Maybe my decision is to not do anything with the money right now. And that's really where this decision clutter gets in the picture. Maybe you can unpack that for us, TK.
I love the way you just said that, because some of my best decisions have not come from a place of me saying, here's what I'm going to do. They've come from a place of me saying, here's what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to decide on this for the next 2 months. Or I'm not going to decide on this until the end of the week. I'm going to sleep on it. I'm going to give myself some time. Because sometimes what we need is more information, but sometimes what we need is time. And thankfully, the options that she set forth, neither of them seem to be necessary. That doesn't make them unimportant, but neither of them are the kind of thing where she's got to decide by the end of the day, by the end of the week, or by the end of the month. And it may just be the case that if you don't have a hell yes on the table, if you don't have a decision that is so compelling to you that wild horses can't hold you back, then that may be an invitation from your heart to sit with it for a while and not rush into it. You want to make the kinds of decisions that you either have to make because life compels you to make them or because your heart compels you to make them. You don't want to make decisions because, well, I just got to get rid of the tension of not knowing what I want to do. Maybe you don't know what to do for a reason, and that reason may be because your heart hasn't really settled on what it truly wants yet.
Yes, and so sometimes we can make an impulsive decision, and obviously that's what Monica's trying to avoid here, just buying a tattoo on impulse. I had a friend who, in high school, got a little tattoo of Marvin the Martian on his arm the day he turned 18, and I was like, oh, that's an impulse decision. I don't think he's wrong or bad for doing that, but I wonder now that we're in our 40s, does he look back at that little tattoo and is he like, oh, maybe I should have done something more intentional. Not that I shouldn't have got a tattoo, but why did I pick that when I was 18? And I did it out of this impulse and this desire, this thirst, right? And so sometimes we have a thirst that guides us, and that type of desire is not unhealthy, right? I've got this glass of water here in front of me, and if I'm thirsty, I'll take a sip of this water. However, if I'm so thirsty and I don't have this glass of water in front of me, I am more susceptible to contaminated water.
Yeah.
So if I'm walking down the street and I'm just dying of thirst and oh my God, all of a sudden I lose all rationality. I see some water in a little puddle in the gutter. It's like, oh, that looks really tantalizing. But I also know logically, if I step back, wait a minute, if I drink that, the outcome might be really negative for me. I might experience a whole lot of pain on the other side of that. And so when we make a decision about any of these things, I wouldn't personally get a tattoo or the laser eye surgery. One is I don't need the laser eye surgery personally. And then tattoos, I look at like, what's the potential downside of that, right? I think tattoos are amazing. Like I said, my wife has a ton of them all over the place. And I think especially when they're well done, they're beautiful. They're an artistic expression of what's in the inside of you and putting it on the outside of you. We can do that through other ways as well. We can do that through our outfits and we can do it through our interactions. We can do it with our personality. But also, what is the downside? What's the trade-off of these purchases? What's the potential downside if I spend money on lasering my eyes? What's the potential downside? Well, one just basic downside is I'm giving up money that I otherwise would have to spend elsewhere. That's a downside. But also, is there a negative consequence for consuming something? For me, I used to buy cars, and when I bought them, I would obviously just put $0 down or as little down as I could. And then I would get the car home, and now I'd have 60 months or 72 months or 83 months worth of payments in front of me. The upside is I got this brand new car and it has that new car smell. But the downside is there's a negative consequence on the other side of this. Now, future me for the next 5, 6, 7 years is responsible for this decision that I made today. And so she brings up a good point. Monica's asking, am I clinging to this money now? Or am I being intentional? And there's a fine line there. You are asking some questions that indicate that you are being intentional. But once you've gotten to a decision, if you then don't act out of fear, well, that in and of itself is a type of decision. I'm deciding to do nothing.
I think that's the heart of it right there. The question about intentionality. I think every question has a body and every question has a heart. The body of the question refers to the content that you're asking about, but the heart of the question is, what are the cries of the heart being conveyed through the expression of that particular dilemma? And the body of this question is like, hey, man, the eye surgery or the tattoos. And the body is important. The body is essential. But the heart of the question is, what am I really doing here? What kind of relationship with money do I really want? Am I being intentional, or am I just reacting to some fears I have based on past patterns of behavior? When I look back on my past, I've got some days where I spent a lot of money frivolously. And if I had the chance to do it over again, I wouldn't do that. And so I've developed a habit of saving in response to that. But what am I really saving for? I'm saving myself from my past self, which would spend frivolously. But what am I saving for? Have I really thought this through? What do I really want? Am I saving money so that I can have freedom and more options later on? Am I saving money so that I can have the flexibility to be able to quit a job and survive for a few months if I ever need to? Am I saving for an emergency? Am I saving because I want to own a house or there's something specific I want to buy? Here I am experiencing the benefits of having saved. And now I've got some options on the table and I don't know what to do with respect to those options. What should I do? I don't think this is about what decision you should make. I think this is about what mindset you should cultivate so that you can always be clear with yourself about what you really want and need, regardless of what the options are. And I think the real question to ask yourself, and only you have the answer here, is why save? I like that you're saving, but saving is a little bit like someone saying, you know what? I'm not proud of the fact that I have a history of eating that food because of the bad effects it had on me. I'm going to stop doing that. Okay, that's cool. That's good. But what are you going to stop doing that for? And what are you going to do instead? You got to have a positive goal that you're working towards. You don't want saving to be, I'm going to stop spending money frivolously. You want it to be, I'm going to use money as a tool to intentionally create the kind of life that I want. What is that? Because the decision about the tattoo and the decision about the eyeglasses or the surgery is really only going to be meaningful when it's contextualized by its ability to support the kind of life you've decided you want to use money as a tool for. The
heart of what you're saying here, TK, is what do you want? And if I were to ask Monica this question, she might say something like happiness, or she wouldn't even say that. She'd say, I want the tattoo, or I want the eye surgery. But the thing you want is never the thing you want. You want the perceived happiness that you believe is on the other side of that thing or that experience, or maybe these non-objects here, right? You want that pleasant feeling, that so-called positive feeling, whether it's happiness or peace or equanimity or joy or excitement. You want that. And so are these the things that are most likely going to give you that feeling? And then even behind that, is that actually what you want? Or is it what you think you want? Has your culture, your peers, your community prescribed you should feel this way, and therefore here's how I'm going to feel this way. Here's what I'm going to acquire externally to get something that's already going on inside here. Nothing wrong with the tattoos, but the tattoo isn't going to make you happy. The happiness is already in here, right now. The tattoos can amplify who you are. The eye surgery can make it easier for you to see. That seems like the more practical option of the two. But just because something is practical doesn't mean that it is always the best decision either. Sometimes living is about being impractical.
That's right. And what I hear in that question of, is it worth it? It's clearly not, do I want it? Because you do want it. But is it worth it is a question of value judgment. Is it okay for me to spend that kind of money on the things that I want? Is it right for me to do something about which arguments can be made, things that perhaps aren't justifiable to another? Is that all right? Would I be okay to do that? And these are the sorts of questions that can only be answered by stepping back from the particulars of the decision and saying, what the heck am I living for? What am I saving for? What is my life all about? Because there's something that someone's going to have to say about everything that you do. And there's not a single decision you can make that can't be framed by some perspective as being irresponsible. But that's not what you want to make your decisions from.
Monica, I want to applaud you for asking some intentional questions about these trade-offs. Am I willing to trade this money for that? And then if so, what am I going to get out of it? And is that the best use of this money? Not only is it worth it, because in a vacuum, sure, if you have an abundance of money, any one of these things would be worth it when you don't have to consider everything else that's going on in your life. In fact, if you just had one of these desires, it'd be really easy for you to say, yes, I have the money. And so is this the best use of this money? And if the answer is yes, great, then I can make that decision. But here, there's a trade-off. You're either trading your eye surgery for the tattoo, or you're trading your tattoo for the eye surgery, or maybe you're willing to trade off both because there's some other way in which you'd like to use your money. You'd like to spend it elsewhere. Or you'd like to save it for a future. Or maybe you want to create a larger safety net because you associate that with freedom as well. Monica, I'd love to send you a copy of our book, Everything That Remains. This year is the 10th anniversary of Everything That Remains. And really, it's a book about the difficult trade-offs that Ryan and I made back in the corporate world, letting go of the corporate world, trading off the corporate world for a piece of our freedom. And there was a lot of trade-off there. We traded money, we traded status, we traded material possessions, we traded lifestyle because something else, this freedom, this creativity, this other life was worth the trade-off for us.
I want a movie with you and Ryan, a sci-fi movie, and it'll be like a twist on Trading Places. You ever seen that movie? Eddie Murphy. And it'll be like you and Ryan traveling back in time and trading places with your past selves. And the person you are now has to be the corporate sales manager. And the corporate sales Josh has to come on this podcast.
Ooh. Oh, that'd be so good. Although the problem would be I'd come on the podcast, I'd just be filled with initialisms and acronyms and corporate jargon. And
yeah, but you'd have to deal with me and Bama, and that would be comedy all day.
Speaking of Bama, before we get back to our callers, Malabama, what time is it?
You know what time it is. It's time for the lightning round, where we answer the Patreon community chat's question of the week.
Yes, indeed. Now, during the lightning round, we each have 60 seconds to answer your question with a short, shareable, minimal maxim. You can find this episode's maxims in the show notes at theminimalists.com/podcast and every minimal maxim ever at minimalmaxims.com. We'll also deliver our weekly show notes directly to your inbox, including 5 new maxims every Monday for free if you sign up for our email newsletter at theminimalists.email. All those links you can find in the show notes as well. We'll never send you spam or junk or advertisements if you're on our newsletter, but we will start your week with a dose of simplicity. Alabama, what is the question of the week this week?
What's your favorite pleasure that money can't buy?
TK, I think you came up with this one. What's your favorite pleasure that money can't buy? Almost the inverse of Monica's question a moment ago. So she's buying something that will give her a pleasant feeling afterward. Ideally, even the tattoo, it might be really unpleasant, which is another lesson, right? Sometimes we have to go through something unpleasant to get the outcome that we want. I thought maybe we would read a few of our patrons' comments here. Michael, Alexis, and several others had this to say, Bama.
Time with loved ones.
This idea of time came up again and again and again. And I think both of our pithy answers have a bit to do with time. You want to give us something pithy, TK Coleman?
Yeah, my pithy is money saves time, but it can't buy the courage to be present. Now, I say courage to be present because I believe that money can buy you a day off. If you don't have money, usually what you have to do in order to get money is you have to sell your time. You have to maybe hire yourself out and give up your time to go create some value for someone who will then pay you. Or you may have to sell your time in the form of devoting yourself to acquiring knowledge that you can then sell without giving up your time. So if you have money, then you can literally buy yourself a day off. Here's a day where I don't have to say yes to anyone because I have the money to take the day off. But when you have that day off, do you have the ability to relax, to be present, to say no to people, to look within? And if you don't, are you willing to learn? Are you willing to go through the discomfort and the tension of looking within that deep ocean of yourself and waiting until the waters become still? Confronting what is within you, that's incredibly difficult to do. There are many people with a lot of money and who don't have busy lives. And the moment they get the slightest whiff of that free time, they immediately find some way to clutter it up with busyness to avoid the confrontation with the void. And so one thing that money can't buy is the courage to sit alone in a room with yourself, to be present and to ask, what can you teach me? I'm here. I'm willing to listen.
And in a way, what you're talking about is, what am I going to do with this freedom?
Yeah.
Because if I've lent out my time to so many other people, and we do it in a bunch of ways, it's not just with having a job. There's nothing wrong with having a job, but we lend out our time to telemarketers. A telemarketer called me the other day, and I played a fun little cat and mouse game with them just because I dislike telemarketers.
Do you really do this?
Oh, yeah. Let's go back to something pithy here, because I love what you were talking about, TK, with money. When you said money saves time, but it can't buy the courage to be present, I would just append that by saying buying a Rolex will not buy you more time. We have a lot of people in the Patreon community chat talking about time, and Amy said time outside, and a lot of the things that people really want to experience, a lot of the pleasures that money can't buy.
Yeah.
A lot of it has to do with time, even if it's not directly related to time.
Yeah.
And the problem is, we often buy things that we think are going to make us happy, like a Rolex, but buying a Rolex doesn't buy you more time. In fact, it might extract some time from your life. If a Rolex is thousands of dollars, what do I have to do to get those thousands of dollars? Maybe I have to part with my time. Even if I'm buying a cup of coffee at the coffee shop across the street and it's $5, is this worth $5 of my time? Is another way to think about it. Not $5 of currency, but what did it take to get these $5? And am I willing to part with that, even though I have that money in my checking account?
Yeah, I always find money and time discussions interesting. I think money certainly can't buy time already spent, but it certainly can buy time not yet spent, right? You can pay $20 for a parking space, and that can save you an hour of driving around trying to find a good park, right? Or you can have the money to take a day off or take a vacation, and that can save you the time you would have spent having to do something for the money. So there is a sense in which it can save time, but you can't recover it. You can't get your 20s back. You can't get watching your kids grow up back. You know, you can't get your youth back or whatever it may be. You can't get your health back. And money certainly does have those limitations. But I like what you had to say about being present, man. The willingness to be present, the courage to be present, all of that is one of the sweetest joys. And it's the foundation for all other forms of joy, because what can you possibly enjoy if you're not able to be present with it?
What this question initially birthed was another maxim from you when you said that money buys presence, not presence.
Yeah.
And quite often, money will buy physical things, but it's not going to buy you what you want. It's not going to buy you the time behind it. And then you're adding on something here. You buy an actual gift for someone, a present. You know what? If they don't like it, they can return it. But if I waste your time, there's no refund for wasted time.
Yeah.
There's no refund for misspent time. And I think that keeps coming up again and again. Several other patrons said what they would do. What's your favorite pleasure that money can't buy? Here's what Rin said.
Feeling the sun on my skin.
And then Ashley said,
thunderstorms.
And then there was another one. Fadila said, the sound of rain and, the petrichor that follows.
Yes.
That might be our word of the week.
Petrichor.
People were often asking me to do a vocabulary word of the week. Petrichor, that's like the feeling or the smell of
rain. It's like
rain?
the smell of fresh rain.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like what's going on after the rain. And so what these people were talking about here, whether it is Rin saying the sun on my skin, and you contrast that with Ashley wants the thunderstorms. And you don't want all of these things all of the time, right? If it was just raining all the time, well, then you'd be in Ketchikan, Alaska, and you would probably get tired of the rain. But the variety, we have day because we have night. If we didn't have night, we wouldn't call it day. We would just call it being, right? If we had only sun all the time, we wouldn't really have a way to describe when it is overcast outside, right? And so I think quite often, many of the pleasures that these people are talking about has to do with how it lives in contrast with the rest of our lives. In fact, Jessica and Kristen both said the same thing.
A mid-afternoon nap.
I took one of those yesterday, a mid-afternoon nap, and it was outstanding. But I wouldn't want to take a mid-afternoon nap 24 hours a day, right? Then I would just be dead. And so it is in contrast to the waking hours. The mid-afternoon nap is so compelling because it gives me the energy then to tackle the rest of the day, to embrace the rest of the day, to enjoy the rest of the day.
Hey, man, we both gave maxims and kind of philosophically reflected on the concept. But what's your direct answer to this question that other people are answering? What is your favorite pleasure that money can't buy?
Man, I was going to say sex, but we know that money can buy that for sure.
Heavens.
Heavens.
Hey, I'm not advocating for that, but I know the commenters would be like, actually, Josh, you know that.
Yeah, it can buy, depending on how you define it, right? It can buy intercourse, not intimacy.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's a great way to put it, right? And so for me, intimacy is one of those things, but not just sexual intimacy, right? Yeah. But going on a walk with my wife, there's an intimacy that we share there. We have a partially kid-free summer this summer, and so we have more time together where it is just the two of us. And I can't buy that with money. I can't buy that level of intimacy. Intimacy also requires this uninterrupted being, this presence, right? We've all been with someone before, whether it's at dinner or we're at a movie, and you see the couple, or you see this other person you're with, or you see it in yourself, although it's much harder to see in yourself. You just pick up the phone, you're responding to things that are going on inside the glowing screen.
Yeah.
And you're not paying attention to that real, living, breathing human being that you love that's right there in front of you.
Yeah.
When I put my phone on a desk, so you and I are at a podcast desk right now in the studio here, if I were to put my phone right in between us, it almost puts up this invisible smoke screen. And it says, TK, you're the most important thing to me, unless anyone else decides to interrupt us right now. And so what is, if I go back to this question, what is your favorite pleasure that money can't buy? Uninterrupted intimacy.
Ooh, that's good. I think mine is related. Just I'll express it maybe in more colloquial terms or less romantic terms. And it's that opportunity to connect with people. Like you ever just taken a walk and someone is walking their dog, and maybe it's like a cute little puppy that's just so excited to see you. You've never seen this puppy or this person in your life, but that puppy is just trying to get at you. And you receive the puppy, and the person who owns the dog lets the puppy come at you, and that puppy just jumps all over you and just gives you all that love. And it just feels so good. You love on the puppy loves you. And yet, at a deeper level, you know it's about more than just you and the puppy. It's about you and that human being, because we live in a world where it's like, you and I don't know each other, fellow human. And I don't know what you're up to. You don't know what I'm up to. I don't know if I can trust you. You don't know if I can trust me. I'm wounded and you're wounded. And so it's kind of hard for us to look each other in the eye so directly and say, hello, how are you? I wish you well. But your puppy is kind of like a little bridge between us. And in this moment where you're letting me play with the puppy and I'm playing with the puppy, you and I are also communicating indirectly as well. We're saying, I see each other and I feel safe connecting with you in this way. It's good to see you and it's good to be seen. Those are the kinds of moments in life, whether a baby does that for us or a puppy does it for us, where it's just a reminder, like, this is what life is all about. Being able to connect with one another without needing to guard ourselves.
Mm. Oh, that's good. Being able to connect without putting up the guards that actually derail the connection or disconnect the connection, which is so easy to do. I find that if I go to some sort of event where it is mixed with parents and children, it's so much easier for me to connect with the children. I wonder if anyone else listening to this has that experience. You can let us know in the comments. But connecting, because there's no decorous dance that is required like it is with the adults. So I don't walk up to a kid and say, so what do you do?
Right.
You go, what are you doing?
Yes. And so what do you do is like this philosophical question. And we all know what you mean. Like, how do you earn a living, right? So you can try to buy back the time that you've lost.
Yeah.
But with a kid, it's like, what is going on right here in front of you right now? It's so much easier to connect because we don't have those barriers up in front of us that we learn to place in front of us as almost like this protection mechanism after we've been hurt by something or we've lost something or we've experienced grief in some way. And all these barriers get built up. And then what we do with small talk is try to find subtle ways to get through all of these barriers that each of these adult humans has built.
Yeah, you're walking down the street in LA and some brother says to you, hey man, you smell kind of good. It's like, wait, where are you coming from, man? You trying to sell me something? What do you want? What's going on, right? But a little puppy's like, oh, you smell so good. You taste so good. And you're like, oh, little puppy, that's so cute. Thank you for making my day. The defenses are down, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, pure connection.
Although sometimes when someone has a dog and they don't have that dog under control, that can put up a defense, right?
Yeah.
Like if I'm walking through where I live up in Ojai, there's like this meadowland, this nature path, and quite often they're like really cute dogs, really well behaved. But then sometimes there's one that like the owners just can't control on the leash, and it's like lunging at you And this happened to me just the other day. And so I said, oh, no, thank you. Like the dog was like trying to get up on me. And the owner looked like almost offended that I didn't want the dog, it was a giant dog, tackling me on this dirt trail. And just said, no, thank you. And I wasn't offended that they were offended, but yeah. Sometimes we need permission. Well, not sometimes. We always need permission before we can put our hands on someone else. A few other things that people answer this question. What's your favorite pleasure that money can't buy? Donnell said this.
Writing poetry and prose.
And then Summer said,
making something in the studio with fabric.
There's this element, and this came up a few times in the Patreon community chats with not just Donnell and Summer, but there's this idea of that money can't buy creativity. But sometimes we get lost. We forget. We conflate the instruments of creativity as though I am being creative. If I just had the right computer, then I could be the designer I've always wanted to be. If I had the right pen, then I could be the writer that I always want to be. If I had the right software program, I could be the editor that I've always wanted to be. If I have all of the instruments that I see the people whom I aspire to be like, if I were to acquire their instruments, I will somehow, via osmosis, become just like those creative people. And it's true that there's nothing wrong with those instruments. Those tools can really help us, right? But you don't need a specific pen to be a writer. There are a bunch of different ways. I was actually just joking with my wife yesterday. She said, "What were you doing this morning?" I said, "Oh, I was just writing." I said, "Well, actually, I was typing. I don't really write that much anymore." And so maybe I'm not a writer. Maybe I'm just a typer, right? But when I say I'm a writer, we know what we mean. But I'm not actually interested in the label of being a writer. I'm much more interested in the creative act itself.
Oh, very interesting. You know, it's funny for me just because the types of struggles I've faced in my life, I've spent most of my life being almost 100% internal, meaning like not thinking about success as having anything to do with the circumstances and conditions, but it's all about my work ethic. It's all about my character. It's all about my mindset. It's all about the way I treat people. It's all about the amount of self-respect that I have, because I've just had to push past circumstances that were way, way, way lower than my ideals. And that was necessary to get through them. And I'm actually coming out on the other side of that, where I'm appreciating the external forms of support that are necessary to complement that success. Like, hey, look, I got the mindset. I got the work ethic. I got the attitude. I'm treating myself well. But you know what? I actually need a certain kind of physical space to be in order for me to concentrate and be productive in the way that I need to be. I actually do need a certain kind of tool here in order to be able to produce quality work. And I think the lesson here, or the balance here, isn't that money can't buy you access to things that significantly enhance your ability to be creative and constructive, but rather never underestimate our capacity to make ourselves miserable, even with the best of tools at our disposal.
Yes, and in fact, those tools can get in the way, because I thought this new computer was going to make me a better designer, or I thought this software program was going to make me finish my book. But of course it doesn't. Those things do enhance, as TK said, enhance the experience of creating. It's just like when I think about being mindful or meditative or in the moment, it is possible to be present in Times Square. It's more difficult there because there are so much noise, so many distractions, but there are masters of living, the Oshos of the world, who I think would be just as present in Times Square as they would in some sort of sanctuary somewhere. But the inverse of that is also true. It's possible to be just as stuck in the past, clinging to the nostalgia of yesteryear in a sanctuary. In fact, quite often what happens, I remember the first time I did a float tank, which is a type of sanctuary in a way, a sensory deprivation tank. Mm-hmm. What you learn is, it's way more chaotic up here in my head than I ever realized, because it was numbed by all of the noise in my everyday life. And when you take away all of that noise, all that's left is the chaos that's going on inside me. Let us know what your favorite pleasure that money can't buy is. You can comment on Patreon in the community chats over there. We're just getting started, TK. Alabama. We have oodles of callers to talk to. But first, real quick, for right here, right now, here's one thing that's going on in the life of the minimalists. The end of everything. That's right. It's the end of everything. Well, the Minimalist Everything Tour, that is. The Minimalist Everything Tour 2024 ends on July 19th with one more stop in San Francisco, California. There are still a few free tickets left on our website. We hope to see you there. Side note, you can listen to every event from that tour and previous tours if you subscribe to the True Fan tier on our Patreon. All right, Alabama, what else you got for us?
Here's a minimalist insight from one of our listeners.
Hi, guys. This is Tammy from Thompson Station, Tennessee, a proud Patreon subscriber. About 10 years ago, I discovered Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. She provides free books to children up to age 5 worldwide. One book will be mailed to your child every month. In honor of her daddy, it became her mission to inspire in kids the love of reading. Check out the website imaginationlibrary.com to see if it's available in your area. Thanks, guys, in Alabama for all that you do. Bye.
Tammy, thank you so much for that imaginative tip. For anyone else who has a listener tip or insight about this episode or any other episode, leave a comment on Patreon or YouTube, or better yet, send a voice memo to podcast@theminimalists.com so we can feature your lovely voice on the show. All right, TK, that is the first 37.9% of episode 447. We'll see you all on Patreon for the full Maximal edition, which includes answers to a bunch more questions. Questions like, if everyone is wearing logos, doesn't it call more attention to your clothes if you're a minimalist who refuses to wear logos? How can I turn my smartphone into a simple, distraction-free device? How do I decide whether I should get rid of a sentimental item or just keep it? Plus a million more questions and simple living segments over on the Minimalist Private Podcast. We also have an outstanding home tour from one of our listeners this week on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/theminimalist or click the link down in the description to subscribe and get your personal link so that our weekly Maximal episodes play in your favorite podcast app. You also gain access to all of our podcast archives all the way back to episode 001. By the way, Patreon is now offering free trials, so if you'd like to test drive our private podcast, you can join for 7 days for free. And that is our minimal episode for today. If you leave here with just one message, let it be this: love people and use things, because the opposite never works. Thanks for listening, y'all.
We'll see you next time.
Peace.
Every little thing you think that you need, every little thing you think that you need, every little thing that's just feeding your greed. Oh, I bet that you'd be fine without it.